Our reading is a reading from the book of Exodus. And by the way, this is also the first book in the Holy Islamic Quran. And since we're in Ramadan, I wanted to mention that. The Lord said to Moses, "Go down at once to your people, whom you brought out of the land of Egypt, for they have become depraved. They have soon turned aside from the way I pointed out to them, making for themselves a molten calf and worshiping it, sacrificing to it and crying out, 'This is your God, O Israel, who brought you out of the land of Egypt.' The Lord said to Moses, 'I see how stiff-necked this people is. Let me alone then, that my wrath may blaze up against them to consume them. Then I will make of you a great nation.' But Moses implored God, saying, 'Why, O Lord, should your wrath blaze up against your own people, whom you brought out of the land of Egypt? With such great power and with so strong a hand, why should the Egyptians say, with evil intent God brought them out, that God might kill them in the mountains and exterminate them from the face of the earth? Let your blazing wrath die down. Relent in punishing your people. Do not forget Sarah and Abraham, Rebekah and Isaac, and Leah and Rachel and Jacob, your chosen ones, to whom you promised, I will make your descendants as numerous as the stars in the sky, and all this land that I promised. I will give your descendants as a perpetual heritage.' So the Lord relented, and the disaster that threatened the Israelites was forestalled." The word of God.
The Lord be with you. A reading from the Holy Gospel according to John. Jesus said to the people, "If I testify on my own behalf, my testimony is not true, but there is another who testifies on my behalf, and I know that this testimony is true. You sent emissaries to John, and he testified to the truth. I do not accept human testimony, but I say this so that you may be saved. John was a burning and shining lamp, and for a while you were content to rejoice in his light. But I have testimony greater than John's. The works that God gave me to accomplish, these works that I perform testify on my behalf that my God has sent me." The word of the Lord. So I know it's scary seeing an old lady come up here to tell you about her life's experiences. You're thinking, we're never going to get home in time for the news. Why didn't I stream? Well, get over it, because you think you're scared. My husband said start with a joke, and so he gave me one. This man approached his rabbi, and he said, "Rabbi, you are not going to believe this. My son converted to Christianity." And the rabbi said, "You are not going to believe this. My son converted to Christianity. We should pray about it." And the rabbi begins, "God," but God interrupts and says, "You are not going to believe this." Prayers, miracles, and blessings, that's what has shaped my faith experience. I grew up in a faith-based family. We attended Memorial Orthodox Presbyterian Church, and to tell you what that means, us at MOP, that's how we called ourselves, separated from the Christian Reformed Church because they danced and played cards. Bottom line, much of my salvation came at that time from being good. In fact, grace was not often spoke of. That is why I thought that I am nice, so no one would ever want to hurt me. Well, that philosophy was soon tested. When I was 22 years old, we lived on the corner of Park and Goodman in what my mother referred to as the hole. It was a basement apartment. It was very nice. And it only cost us $250 a month rent, but she was used to being in the country. One night, my husband dropped me off at the corner store, and he went to park the car, and they were both equal distances from our apartment. And I got my purchase, which was probably cigarettes, and only by the grace of God have I quit that. But I was coming down the path through an undeveloped lot when I realized that a man was following me. Well, I panicked. He said he was looking for his dog, which didn't help anything. It just made me more anxious. Why I didn't head towards my husband, I'm not sure. Instead, I tried to go down one of the basement stairs into a different opening because I didn't have the keys to my apartment. So I went down these stairs and no luck. I don't know what I thought would happen. It was locked. I went back upstairs and the man knocked me down. I told him, I'm pregnant with twins, and so he punched me in the stomach. Well, I was frozen with fear. We wrestled a little bit, and then I heard a blood-curdling scream. And the man took off, and my husband took off after him, and he caught up with him, and they got in a fight, and he scratched my husband's eye. I don't know if anyone remembers, but this was in 1972. It was the same year that there were some robberies, and the victims were blinded. So I don't know if he had anything to do with those, but it was pretty scary. I have to say, though, that the attack was not the worst part of this whole incident. Fear was. Debilitating fear. I couldn't go anywhere by myself. I couldn't leave the apartment by myself. I had to have security walk me into work and security walk me out. One time I went with my sister to get some food, and she went into the restaurant. I stayed in a nice, safe, locked car, but then all of a sudden I was paralyzed because, oh my gosh, what's going to happen to her? Is she safe? So I prayed for her the whole time. So my mother convinced us to move out of the hole, and we rented a small house in the middle of orchards in Williamson with no neighbors in sight, no traffic, and still, I was about 5 or 6 months pregnant, which is 12 months pregnant in normal pregnancy. You get really big with twins. And I would waddle out to the mailbox and waddle back in. So from the beginning of this, starting at the beginning of my fear, I prayed and recited verses and read Psalms unceasingly. I prayed for my safety. I prayed for the safety of my family and my friends. I prayed for the safety of people I saw on the streets. I just prayed continuously. But I also prayed for relief from this fear because I was about to have 2 kids, and you can't take care of 2 kids with that kind of overwhelming fear. Well, gradually, in the few weeks remaining of my pregnancy, God relieved me of my fear. Just gradually, it just let up. All of a sudden, I was not thinking about it for half an hour, or whatever. So it's just like the song said, through grace my fear is relieved. Everyone remained safe. God was answering my prayers. I left my church and learned about grace from Mark Tidd, a dynamic preacher of the Christian Reformed Church, no more depending on my niceness and my goodness. The years rolled on. We bought a house in Ontario, and we had a daughter to complement our 2 very active sons. And things were okay until a series of tragedies hit us. My brother, who was a protector when I was little, died in a factory in Florida. He was electrocuted by a faulty saw and by wall plugs that had no grounds. OSHA closed the factory down the next day. Then this is what I was afraid of, I'd lose my place. But then my husband's father was hit by a car and died brutally. Our house was robbed, and they killed our dog, which was a Lhasa Apso, so not necessary. And a friend I was helping to take care of died. All of this put too much strain on our marriage, and we separated. So now I was alone with 3 children. I worked full-time and drove my kids to soccer games and soccer practice, dance rehearsals and dance recitals and doctor's appointments, and in the case of my sons, the emergency room. I mean, they are a whole nother set of stories I call the twin stories. Well, aunts and uncles and cousins and another friend died, and for a total of 9 deaths in a year and a half. All my vacation days were spent at the doctor's office or at funerals. My 6-year-old daughter was playing on her toy kitchen. She was playing with her toy phone, and she was calling imaginary church friends to bring food to the next funeral luncheon. I have to backtrack here a little bit because the friend that died, her name was Leona. She lived with another friend, Deli. Before he died, her husband asked Deli to take care of her, and he took that very seriously. He moved in. She had Parkinson's, and he took very good care of her. I started going there with Pastor Ted. Excuse me. I learned this from Mike. Oh, okay, sorry. Now, of course, I lost my place again. Oh, right. And then I started going there with Pastor Ted because he would give her communion and then he'd play the guitar and we'd sing. And soon I realized that she needed a little bit more, so I'd go there. I was a country neighbor of hers, so I would go there and just like soak her feet and put on nail polish, which was not one of my gifts, since wash and set her hair, which is not one of my gifts, but she seemed to enjoy it all right. To show, first of all, I have to tell you that Leona had a lot of money. It's just that her husband asked her when she died to leave the money to his sons from a previous marriage. She took this as meaning don't spend any of it. So she lived on a very small Social Security check. And Deli was a grave digger, so his was not that much bigger. And to show how frugal they were, they had a cistern in the house that was used for the bathroom, but there's no hot water heater. So I would go out to the well and pump some water and then bring it in and put it on the stove. And before we could start the stove, Deli had to light the pilot light because he didn't want to burn that much gas. After Leona died, we adopted Deli, or vice versa, and he came with us to my parents in Avon, and he went with us to the reunion in Bath with my family, and I would go to visit him. He ended up moving to a house that his sister let him use, and now he had no indoor plumbing at all. He had an outhouse. He refused to let me bring him an air conditioner, even in stifling heat. And after he got cancer in the dead of winter, he finally agreed to use the portable camper toilet that my father had, but that was when he had cancer, and it was the dead of winter. Deli also died in the midst of this. Money got very tight, and I was wearing down emotionally and physically. Prayer once again came to my rescue. Rather than start right in at 7:30 on my day off with mounds of laundry and the cleaning, every single mother knows this, and the cleaning and shopping and all that, I would sit with my prayer journal and I'd pray for an hour. I still have boxes of notebooks filled with prayers. I tried thinking, I don't need to pray. I could use that hour in cleaning and when doing my chores. And I would try that and inevitably, I would get much further behind. So that was my lesson. I also went across, we live in the country, and across the street is a piece of land that I think was at one time had a house on it, and surrounded by cornfields. And it's got like a driveway, or what's left of a driveway, which is a trail. I would go there to pray, mostly at night, so I wouldn't worry my children. So I read in the Bible that Abraham would build altars of stones. So I would take a stone. My altars were very small. I'd take a stone there and I would build my own altar and I would leave my prayers there. And then the miracles began. So one time, when it was particularly trying, I went to the land and found these beautiful yellow flowers all over this land. They were gorgeous. They looked like black-eyed Susans, but I'm not I don't know much about flowers either. So I would pick, I just felt like God had left me a bouquet of love. So I would gather these flowers up and I'd take them to friends' and family, and I felt like I was passing on God's love in bouquets. Well, one time after I'd gathered the last of the flowers, I was walking back home and I heard in my mind the song, "For Those Tears I Died." And Jesus said, "Come to the water, stand by my side. I know you are thirsty, you won't be denied. I felt every tear drop when in darkness you cried, and I strove to remind you that for those tears I died." And a voice said to turn around, and I did. And there in the corner of the lot was a cross, a wooden cross that I had not seen. It was buried by vines and lilac bush, but still, I saw it now. It was a wooden cross. My son says it's probably an old clothesline, Mom. And he might be right. But the skeptic, my son the skeptic, what he didn't, account for was that I've lived in that house for 50 years. I never saw those flowers before, and I have never seen them since. So I was still under a lot of stress. I had no idea where we would go when the divorce was final, because I had to pay my ex-husband $25,000 in order to keep the house. I had looked all over this area. I wanted to stay in the area because my sons were teenagers and they had a very solid support system. And I had looked for houses to rent or to buy, and with no luck. I had no luck. And so a week before we would have lost the house, I received a letter in the mail. It was from the lawyer who was the executor of Deli's estate. He left me $50,000. The man who died with no indoor plumbing. So, prayers and miracles and blessings. This is what has shaped my faith. God has blessed me. I prayed 10, 15 years for a man who loved God, like I did. And then one day, I rode my bike to the diner in Webster, and I was having breakfast when in walks the father of my daughter's best friend. And he had been divorced a few years earlier. And he sat down, and with some finagling, the girls got him to ask me on another date. And now we've been married 20 years this August. So like Father Jim said, we have been blessed ever since. We have 6 children, a blended family, and 18 grandchildren. So, prayer, miracles, and blessings. The morning sun paints the day, the waiting shore
welcomes the waves, the wind and trees, new songs create, all to bring you glory. The autumn cool turns the leaves, the river runs to join the sea, the lily blooms, the sparrow sings, all to bring you glory. So how much more can I tell of who you are, when jealously you sought me out and won my heart? And now redeem, I tell my story, all to bring you glory. A promise kept to Abraham, a sea that turned into dry land. The prophet's words revealed your plan, all to bring you glory. Across the world,
sorry, Bonnie.
the
Across the
nation-
world,
the nations sing, by mercy healed, by grace set free, and all for you, beautiful King, all to bring you glory. So how much more can I tell of who you are, when jealously you sought me out and won my heart? And now by love redeemed, I tell my story, all to bring you glory. Gloria, Gloria, glory, Gloria, 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 glory, Gloria, 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 glory, glory. So how much more can I tell of who you are, when jealously you sought me out and won my heart? And now by love redeemed, I tell my story, all to bring you glory. And now by love redeemed,